Hi, and welcome to the Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host and your principal, Dr. Terry Ross, and I'm so glad that you all joined us today because we're continuing our series on wellness. At New Teacher University, we focus on teacher retention through wellness, mentoring, and coaching, and being intentional about all of it. Teachers, we want you to know that you are already enough. So thank you for joining us, and we always have award-winning teachers and administrators. So administrators, this podcast is for you because we believe that teachers are leaders and leaders are teachers. And if you're not teaching your people, they are not growing. So we are your place to come and grow so that you can help fill your teacher's toolbox. So when you're providing feedback, you're not just leaving feedback, you can also leave some strategies and some tools. And today I'm so excited because we have Miss Aeysis Clay from Sculpted Clay Productions. She is the founder and CEO of Sculpted Clay Productions, where they focus on emotional wellness in schools that serve marginalized communities. And today she's going to talk with us about some tips to help get the year started around emotional wellness, around social emotional learning, and using social emotional intelligence. So I'm not going to talk anymore. CEO, Mrs. Aeysis Clay, if you can tell us who you are, the name of your company, and why did you start Sculpted Clay Productions?
Absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really
Absolutely.
excited to be here to talk to you today. Again, I'm Aeysis Clay, and I am the CEO and founder of Sculpted Clay Productions. And how I got to Sculpted Clay Productions is kind of a comedy of errors with a little bit of tragedy thrown in. So I was a theater teacher for many, many years. I went to school for theater. I am a working actress. I was a working actress while I was in teaching as well.
Okay.
Not as much as I do now, though. Um, I started out with the Maryland Department of Juvenile Justice. And that's a funny story in and of itself because my husband and I both were going up for the exact same job. I had zero pedagogy, none of that. I didn't go to school for education. My husband did. They ended up hiring us both, but they hired me specifically to come in and do what they wanted was drama therapy, which I was not a drama therapist, but in their mind, it equated to what they wanted to me to provide for the young people who were incarcerated.
Mhm.
And so that was my introduction to education. And I was there for almost 4 years and I loved it. Terry, I loved it
Yes.
until my heart started breaking over and over again. As you can imagine, the amount of trauma that
Yes.
exists in a place like the youth incarceration center that I taught in. Um, whether it was the recidivism rate, excuse me, of them coming back over and over again,
Yes.
or not coming back and finding out that we lost them to violence. And my heart just kept breaking and breaking. And there was no supports for that, no supports given for the adults that were experiencing that. So I ended up leaving and went to what I thought was the opposite end of the spectrum. I went to a school that was a magnet program where the students had to audition to get into the program.
Yes.
And that's where I stayed for the majority of my career. And I thought I was running from trauma. Honestly, I thought I was running from trauma. But as we all know, trauma is in our communities, things happen in the communities, and the schools become very much a center for where those things kind of play out a lot of times with our young people. And
Absolutely.
so again, over and over again, I was confronted with different things. I left the classroom in 2018 after about 18 years in the classroom. And I was heartbroken, Terry. I was heartbroken. I love teaching. As you can probably see, I love teaching theater.
Yes.
I loved it. And I still do. I still love it. Um, but I couldn't keep going the way I was going. And I noticed again that the supports for the emotional wellness of educators were not there.
Yes.
In my healing process, I wrote a solo show. And my thought was I was going to run from education. I was
Mhm.
running, and I was just going to be a theater, practitioner. I was going to be an actor or
Yes.
director. I wrote this solo show about my journey in education and detailing what I went through. And so many teachers saw it and was like, you're telling my story. You're
Yes.
telling my story. And so I realized that it needed to be more than that. So I took my master's degree and put together a professional development. And so my solo show serves as a keynote. I go around the country performing for districts and for schools. But I don't stop there. I go in and I also facilitate professional development around compassion fatigue, around vicarious trauma, around how those are different from burnout, how we know it or how we
Okay.
think it is, and giving tools and tips, just like we're going to be doing here, on how to do that. So today, excuse me, today I'm going to be taking a couple of tips from my framework, my magic method framework, and sharing that with teachers, hopefully so that they can start off the year and keep the year on a positive note, for themselves first, their family second, and then their students.
Thank you so much for sharing that. You shared a lot in that. One is your gift will make room for you. Although
Mm.
you didn't have an education background, your gift in theater made room for you. And also, I'd like you to share with us, because something I've learned recently over the last few years is that we do have to bridle our passion, because
Mm.
our passion can get in the way of our purpose sometimes. And when you talked about compassion fatigue and the difference between that and burnout, I would love to hear the difference between that, because we wouldn't want people sitting around with compassion fatigue and they're thinking that they're burning out and they need something different. And something that I started doing as a principal is that when teachers would have things happen in their room, trauma, instead of me just going in and maybe removing the students, I started to ask the teachers if they needed a break, or tell them, we'll let someone hold your class, go get you a bottle of water, go take a walk, step outside, take a deep breath, something like that. Because I realized that when a teacher, if you have an altercation in the room, because you will have those from time to time, or if a student comes in and you find out that that student was unalived over the weekend, you need a break. You need to take a step back, because I can
Yeah.
remember as an elementary principal, I had been so used to dealing with high school students. When I was in elementary school, I would hear certain trauma and I would stand there and I couldn't even make it to my office the days that I stood in a custodial's closet and got myself together and dried my tears from what I just heard, so that I could come back out. And why didn't I feel safe enough to let my tears roll right there?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that. And if you could share with us the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout, I would love to hear that before we
Yeah,
get into our strategies.
of course, absolutely. And thank you for asking that question. Because listen, I could talk about this all day. I won't, but I could talk about this all day. So traditionally, we see burnout. Well, let me rephrase this. Burnout is a breakdown in systems. At its core, it's a breakdown in systems. Whether that system is a larger system like the school system at large, like the United States school system, or a system like Prince George's County public system, or Atlanta public school systems, or it can be a personal system that's broken. And so what that looks like is personal systems, you not honoring your own boundaries. So this was me a lot saying yes, over committing to things, and then feeling the weight of all the things that I have to do. And now I am stressed out. I have this anxiety and I'm, not able to cope. Right. So there's very specific things that can be done for burnout. One of the things, the easiest things that leaders can do is really look at, okay, can this be an email or does this need to actually take up time? We've talked about this, lots of people have talked about this
Absolutely.
over the years. Like, okay, how can I lessen the load? Do I have to take their time, or can I just send in an email and then they act accordingly, or react accordingly? Now, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma are two, they sort of fall into burnout, sort of, but they're very different. Whereas burnout can possibly be eased by taking things off of someone's plate, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma deal more with emotions. I like to describe the differences between compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma to the schools and the districts that I support like this. So, compassion fatigue is when you have been exposed to so many different traumas, if you will, or so many different things. It's the cost of caring, where you have students who are experiencing trauma that you know about. They are bringing that to the classroom. Maybe you have family members who are experiencing things. The world right now and the state of the world and all of these things weigh heavily on you, so that the empathy that you once felt is gone. Your empathy wall falls down. And so what that can look like in a classroom is, you know what? I don't even really care. Just don't give me any trouble today. Sit there, be quiet, put your head down. I don't care what you do. Don't do anything. I don't even really care. Just don't give me any trouble. So you have come to the point where you have experienced so much that now you've almost dehumanized the student in front of you. Um, and that is a real reaction. The opposite end of it can look like you absorb, and now you are experiencing anxiety. Now you are experiencing loss of sleep. Now you are experiencing all of these things, almost like PTSD, where things that you have heard about and you see your students and your coworkers and your family and the world going through. Maybe you're not necessarily going through it yourself, but you are feeling the effects of it, and it's starting to affect you physically and mentally. All right. And so it's like hyper empathetic, where it's like your empathy wall is gone, but it's like wide open to everybody. And so every hit feels like it's coming towards you. Okay? Um, so as an educator, of course, we want to kind of stay towards the middle where we keep our empathy. Absolutely. But we also protect our heart so that we can continue to do this heart work that we are called to do. And so, how can we keep ourselves out of the compassion fatigue zone? And I'm so I'm so glad that you shared, and thank you for sharing that with us as far as going, into the custodial closet and having to get yourself together. I talk a lot about this in my professional development, and unfortunately, a lot of school teachers and a lot of schools are dealing with loss, and that's nothing new, but we deal with loss, whether it's coworkers, whether it's students, whether it's families. And what happens is usually the principal or maybe a counselor gets on the PA and they say, we've experienced this. If anyone needs to talk to a grief counselor, they're here, right? So if they are doing great, they have grief counselors there. However, what happens, Terry? A student who's struggling raises their hand and the teacher says, yes. And they're like, I need to go see the counselor. Absolutely. Write a note and they go, are able to talk to somebody. But during the teacher's break, during the teacher's lunch, or during their planning period, or whatever the case may be, what happens? Life happens, the school happens.
Yes.
Things, there's no time for that teacher to deal with whatever that they're feeling. They may have to close the door for a second to get themselves together. They may find a custodial closet. And whether it's a teacher, whether it is the school leadership, but we aren't really giving educators the support they need emotionally in this
Absolutely.
very emotional, job that we do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is so needed. That is so needed. I have a good friend that's a principal, and I tell her all the time that you need to leave that school. You've had 5 years there. This should be your last year, because there's only so much that you can take in terms of the deaths in the community, where she's checked her camera and she's witnessed murders, things like that. So you're exactly right that absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm just excited to hear what are the tips to start the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, they're coming from my magic method framework. And
Yes,
magic obviously is an acronym. And so the very first one is mindfulness. And we hear this all the
yes,
time. And what I hear from teachers is like, okay, but when am I going to have time to do this? Like, for real, when am I going to have
absolutely.
time? Because as educators, we have very specific ideas and thoughts around time, which we're not going to get into today. But so one of the things that I offer them are 1 minute mindfulness activities. So
Okay.
mindfulness is literally just about being present. So at every professional development that I deliver, I say, how many people associate with this? You wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, you yawn maybe, and then your brain kicks on. Oh, that's
Yes.
right, I got to do this. Oh, that's right, my child needs X, Y, and Z. Oh crap, I got to make sure that I leave early because I got to get gas. Oh, when I get to school, I got to do, and then it goes this all throughout the day
Yes.
until you get home, until you go to, and when you get home, it's all about home life
Yes.
until you lay down, finally able to get yourself to sleep, and the next day it happens again. That's what I call hamster wheel brain, right? Mindfulness is just the practice of stopping that and being in the moment. You're not thinking about what's to come. You're not thinking about what just happened. Being in the moment. And it sounds very difficult for someone who experiences this all the time. Like, I can't get my mind to stop, right?
Yes.
So how do we do that, right? How do we do that in 30 seconds? So I'm going to give you a tool right now. All right. The easiest way to do that is to find the smallest sound that you can inside of the space that you're in right now. Sounds crazy, but if you actually just concentrate on the smallest sound, and that wasn't even 30 seconds.
Right.
I encourage my teachers and my educators to take at least 30 seconds, even if you can't take a minute, and to do that in between each class. Or bonus tip, build it into your warm up. Build 1 minute into your warm up. And so at the start of class, and you talked about, being in a high school, that was my wheelhouse.
Yes.
High school was my wheelhouse. And so what happens is that students experience lots of noise and lots of triggers and all kinds of things in between classes, right? It's not a very quiet transition in high school, right? So when they get to your class, they're on 100. Their mind is on 100. How can you get them and you focused? 1 minute, find the smallest sound that you can in the class. Like, encourage all of them to do that. Okay, so once you're able to find that 1 minute of silence with yourself, or with, again, bonus tip, with your classes, you're able to get your minds in a place, especially their minds in a place where they can learn, instead of fighting against what just happened in that last class, or fighting against what just happened in the transition. All right. How can you get everyone present right now? Okay. But again, for yourself, it's needed. A lot of times teachers will I just say teachers, but principals as well.
Yes.
Will, that moment when they get in the car at the end of the day, where no one's calling your name.
Yes.
And it's silent, that moment of stillness and silence is a form of mindfulness. But how can we embed it throughout the day?
Yes. Now, when they find that 1 minute of sound, when they find that smallest sound, what do they do with it? Just listen, just tone in on that one thing.
Just hone in on that.
Hone in.
The process of looking for it, even in itself, is an act of mindfulness. So what you're trying to do, you're not trying to do anything with the sound. Of course, you're not trying to affect it. But what you're trying to do is to get your mind, that hamster wheel, slow down. You're breathing more deeply. You are breathing slowly, and now you are in a more regulated mindset. Now, if you're doing it with the class, there's all kinds of like fun stuff that you can do as far as the smallest sound that you heard. If you're doing this with younger students, it could possibly be, right, popcorn. What sounds did you hear? All right, so let's make those sounds really quickly. Let's see if we can imitate those sounds. For older students, people talk about high schools, being a little too cool for school, but they like to do cute stuff like that as well.
They love it. They still love to get a sticker. Trust me.
Absolutely.
They love a high five just like anyone else.
Absolutely.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you for that mindfulness strategy. So what's strategy number 2?
Strategy number 2 is actually in my magic method framework, and that's intentional and preventative self-care. Intentional and preventative self-care. Okay. So we hear self-care all the time, right? What is self-care? Now, what I'm finding with myself and with my colleagues is that what we're actually practicing is aftercare.
Mm.
So what this looks like is you have had a crazy day. Tuesday was crazy. You had two fights in your room. You know, a parent is, called and was very upset. You lost some stuff. And so you're like, you know what? I'm calling off on Friday. That's aftercare. That's you putting stuff in place to take care of you after something has happened.
Mm.
And that's not really sustainable. It's
No.
helpful, yes. I'm not saying don't do that. But the point of intentional and preventative self-care is that you don't necessarily have to do so much aftercare anymore because it's baked into what you do all the time. And so finding at least one thing that you can do every other day at the you know least. Really, you want to kind of go for something that you can do every day. What's that one thing that you can do for yourself every day? Something small, obviously, to take care of yourself. I'm not saying and I don't think manicure necessarily is the best self-care,
Absolutely. That's
but
maintenance. That's
yes, it's maintenance,
beauty.
right?
Yes.
But what's one thing that you can do for you, not for your partner, not for your child, not for your students, not for anyone else, for you every day to pour into your cup, as they say. And so finding that one intentional and preventative self-care instead of always leaning on aftercare.
This is so deep what you just said, because most of us, when we say, oh, I'm going to get some self-care, we're going to get aftercare.
Yeah.
What's that
Yeah.
thing we're doing every day? And so for me, I think I've built in making sure that I eat a salad.
Mm,
Is that
yes.
self-care?
Yes,
I try to
absolutely.
make sure that I do that every day. My water, things like that, and making sure that I drink high quality water.
Yeah.
Um,
High quality H2O.
yes, 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 yes. But that is something that most of our self-care is aftercare. And
Yeah.
administrators, that's why it's so important that we build things into the school week, into the school day, preferably. But definitely, we don't need to let a week go by that we don't provide our teachers with self-care, and it's not aftercare.
Yeah. And ourselves as leaders, because it starts with the leader. It cannot,
Absolutely.
we can't expect uh, teachers' emotional wellness to trickle down to the students if the leadership is struggling. It starts
Absolutely.
at the head. So, what are you doing for yourself? And walks are wonderful. Get outside, put your foot on some grass, on some ground, get
Yes.
fresh air, even if it's just for 3 minutes. Literally, if it's just for 3 to 5 minutes, how can you walk around? How can you get some fresh air? So important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
strategy number 3.
Strategy number 3 is the C in my magic method framework, and it's creative reflection. As I told you
Creative
before,
reflection.
yes, I am an arts teacher, and so creativity is a part of my life every day. It's actually built into some of the ways that I care for myself. I told you before that I wrote a solo show about my journey.
Mhm.
And yes, that solo show has been healing for so many educators. However, it started with me.
Mhm.
It was with my solo show that I began healing. And so it was through the power of creative writing that I realized that I was carrying so much in my head and in my heart and in my body. And by writing it down, it gave me a place to put it. So I am going to encourage anyone who is out there, if you ever, from now to back when you were a teenager or a young person, um, did you write poetry? Did you like to write stories? Did you like to draw? Doodling, mindful doodling is also a part of something that I teach in my workshops.
Yes.
But connect to that thing, and while you are connecting to that thing, use it as a vehicle to get out whatever it is you're feeling emotionally right now. So if visual art was your thing when you were young and you used to draw like Spider-Man, or maybe just draw letters or whatever it is that you used to do, how can you incorporate that into your practice? caring for yourself emotionally. What are you
Yes.
feeling today? Are you like red hot and mad and spitting fire because of something that happened? Great. What does that look like on the page? And by the time that you have done that and experienced that, you'll find that you'll become a lot more regulated. Your breathing will have evened out a little bit, and you'll start feeling a lot better. So, like I said, in my workshops and my professional development, we go deep into creative reflection. I even have a course called Write to Create for educators, to use writing as a tool for wellness.
This is so awesome. You know, most of the time when I write down what I've experienced during the day, by the time I finish writing it, and especially if it's something that like really bothered me, I'm like, this is so crazy. Why did I even write this? Is that part of the process? You looking at it from another perspective and saying, why did I even care so much about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So a part of oh man, I love this conversation. I just talked about right to create, and a part of the things that we talk about in that is writing from inside of it versus writing from on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so writing from inside of it is kind of what I just explained. So with the visual art, so you're journaling and you're just like spitting fire. You're just like something
Yes.
so, it's gotten you so fired up. That's writing inside of it, right? Writing on top of it is looking at it after you've had an opportunity to calm down
Mm-hmm.
and actually write about it in a more regulated mindset, right? And that's going to look two different, in two different ways, obviously. But when you go back and read those things, and both are valuable,
Mm-hmm.
both are valuable. But when you go back and read those things, you can kind of see the progression, especially if you do it over a span of time and not just sporadically, but you literally commit to journaling or to some kind of creative reflection practice. You'll start noticing patterns. You'll start noticing patterns in yourself and how you react to things. You'll
Mm-hmm.
start noticing patterns in things that happen to you, maybe a lesson, maybe that you have yet to learn and that you're still learning on the path to learning. And so once you get to that point where you can actually reflect on the journey through your art, your creativity,
Mm-hmm.
then healing happens.
Yes, and because I think what I do is I write inside of it and then I observe it on top of it.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and I don't write the on top of it down because I'll say, why did you even spend your time dealing with that like that? And I should start writing that piece because that's where you rewrite the story. That's where you create
Yeah.
your ending. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that. You've shared so much with us today. You all better get with us, Sculpted Clay Productions. We need this not just for the teachers, for the students, and for the families, because
Yes.
we've experienced a lot over the last 5 years. And I've said quite a bit that the post-pandemic principle is going to have to lead with more compassion than any other principle in modern history, and maybe even in history. I don't know what it's been like, but I know from the years that I've spent in school to leading schools and going to school that this post-pandemic principle is going to have to approach things much differently, because many teachers had an awakening where they realized, hey, I'm enough without me going in 2 hours early and staying 2 hours late.
Right.
I'm enough without me saying yes to everything that comes my way. So it's going to take a different type of leadership, and we're going to have to lead with compassion if we want to make a difference and if we want to lead great schools. So thank you so much for sharing that. And when you said the cost of caring, I had to write that down
Mhm.
because we do pay a cost for caring. And then I do see people, and thank you for helping me to see that people didn't start off not caring.
Right.
They experienced compassion fatigue.
Absolutely.
And how do we awaken that back up in them where some people are just numb to it? Like I've known leaders that toward the end of their career, they won't let any type of activities come into school because they've been burned so many times by activities
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they don't want to deal with it. And where
Yeah.
I've always been that fresh mindset person, say, hey, let this happen, let that happen. I was just looking back through an old iPhone of mine, and when I was a principal in Buffalo, New York, I saw where we took 50 kids to a Jay-Z concert. And I was telling my wife, I said, how that happened is I found out that the Sean Carter Foundation called the school and offered tickets, and they turned them down. And I was like, why would we turn down tickets to a Jay-Z concert? Well, we're just not going to do it, and the children are going to do this, and this will happen. And I said no. And I went to my football coach, Coach McDuffie. I said, hey, will you help me chaperone the kids to a
Mhm.
Jay-Z concert? And he would be like, yes, big dog, let's make it
Of
happen, you
course.
know?
Yes.
So the coach and I, we got together. I called, they gave us the tickets. And it was snow and ice on the road. We took 50 kids to the Jay-Z concert and just had a great time. It was almost like a movie. And but I've just never experienced that piece where, no, I'm not going to do this. Even as a principal, I can remember the BMX bike company calling and saying that we've just had a principal to cancel because it's so close to testing, and we were going to do a free show at their school. Can you take it? Somebody referred us to you. I was like, absolutely, yes. I can do it. And the teacher was upset. Well, we have testing coming up. We can. I'm like, hey, this is the perfect break away from testing.
Exactly.
This is
It
the
takes.
go on.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
please.
No, this is the perfect time for us to do something different because the brain loves routine, but it also loves some novelty in there that's like, hey, what's happening today? You know?
Hmm. Hmm. It takes a creative mind, a creative thinker to really be a post-pandemic principal.
Yes.
I think we have to lean into that creative thinking, where we, like you were saying, we offer these things and we say yes to things and find ways. Because as you said, the Jay-Z concert, I was like, oh my goodness, the amount of arts integration, excuse me, arts integration that could have happened with that. Like
Yes.
your English teachers, oh my goodness, like taking clean version of his lyrics and look at alliteration, look at, all kinds of things that he's
Yes.
doing with language. Oh my goodness, taking his career in math classes and, where it, how much does he make now? How much, looking at cost and all these things, and
Absolutely.
you know and those are legitimate learning opportunities, and those are learning opportunities that turn students on and that get them
Absolutely.
excited about learning. And I think that's what we have to make sure that we are doing, and not necessarily feeling like we have to put a show on, for students, but how can we get them excited about learning?
Absolutely.
And so things like you were talking about, they make kids excited. But how can
Yes.
we tie that in to what we're teaching to
Absolutely.
strengthen that learning? So
And
thank you so
putting
much for sharing that.
Yes, and putting their talent on display. That's another thing I found in that phone. I looked at the talent shows because I put on a monthly talent review, and it was awesome. And I looked at the ones from the beginning to the last one we had at the end of the year. The last one we had at the end of the year, when I tell you it was amazing, the confidence. And I was looking at this one young lady. She sung "Million Dollar Bill" by Whitney Houston. Does he make you feel like $1 million? Something like that. And she's standing up there singing. Then all of a sudden, she held the mic out to the audience for them to say, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," and the audience chimed in. And then she started walking across the stage like Aretha Franklin. And I mean, it was just wow. The confidence that built for them to, like, from the first show to not being able to get students to the last show, that we ran out of time in the school day for it. So
Wow.
when we help our children to
Yeah.
come outside, and the trauma that I saw some of those children experience throughout the year, this one young man, I can remember he was having a meltdown in the hall, and I'm a trained massage therapist. I don't practice, but I was a trained massage therapist. And I know that touching this part of the body is a safe place.
Hmm.
And I can remember, just putting my hand on his shoulder, and he had this big meltdown. And then I
Mm.
found out that he had experienced some things, but by the end of the year, I was going through that phone looking at pictures, and he and I taking a selfie like this together at
Wow.
graduation, So
Wow.
those type of things. And I told my wife, I'm going to pull all that stuff together and make a documentary, because that year was absolutely a movie to just
Yeah.
see. And what it reminded me of was to enjoy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in
Mm-hmm.
the now. Don't be in the
Mm-hmm.
now, not enjoying those moments because you're worried about something that happened yesterday or something somebody said 3 months ago. Stay in the now,
Yeah.
cherish those moments, and know that there's a cost for caring, but how do you create that balance?
Yes.
that you
Yeah.
enjoy what's happening right now. You enjoy that smile, that fist bump, that joke
Yeah.
that the student cracked. Even if they did go a little bit too far, you can talk about that to them a little bit later because they will. They're teenagers. But just
Right.
enjoying that. And Isis, this has just been a joy. This has been therapy for me talking to you today. Is there
Oh,
anything that you'd like to share with the schools and the principals and teachers that will be listening to this on our as we close out?
yeah, yeah. So two things. One, you got this, y'all. It's not easy. I know it's not easy, but you got this. Make sure that you care for you first, your family second, and then your students, because when you bring you fully to the classroom, into the school building, it's magic. It's magic. It's what they need. And secondly, if there's anyone who wants to connect, excuse me, anyone who wants to connect with me at all, you can follow me on social media at Sculpted Clay on Instagram, or Aeysis on Facebook, Ayesis. Um, my website is www.sculptedclayproductions.com. And I'm always looking for schools that I can support, especially schools that support marginalized communities. Um, and yeah, that's it.
And all of that information will be at the end of this podcast. So let's make sure that we follow, like, and subscribe to Sculpted Clay Productions and Isis Clay. And while you're doing that, find New Teacher University and like and subscribe as well. But this has
Absolutely.
just been so awesome. I'm going to have to bump this one up because we need this. We need more of this. The first strategy was mindfulness. The
Mhm.
second strategy was,
Intentional and preventative self care,
and the third strategy,
creative reflection.
creative reflection. We need all of those things. So let's make sure that we follow, like, and subscribe to Sculpted Clay Productions, and make sure that you contact Isis to make sure she get out into your school, your district, your community, because we've experienced so much trauma and loss over the last 5 years that it's almost insurmountable, the way it piles up. I think about this kid who we had lost at one school I was working at, and he was a senior and they were looking for him, and I was going through the graduation audit with the counselors, and someone said, oh well, he lost his mom during COVID,
Oh my
during the
gosh.
pandemic.
Yeah.
And everyone at that table mobilized, and we found that student. We've got the makeup work together. We had to call the district security officers because we needed some help above what we had in the building. But we tracked that student down. We made sure that he had the things that he needed for graduation. And the kid had stopped school because he felt like he was living with a relative and he needed to help support that relative because his baby sibling was there that was in middle school.
Mm,
And I heard a person at the district level saying, well, we bought them computers and they act like they don't care. And I'm thinking, like, we have children out here losing parents.
right.
A
Right.
computer is the last thing on their mind. So I'm just going to write that off to that person may have been experiencing compassion fatigue,
There we
because I
go.
was judging that person, but thank you
There we go.
for
There we
giving me
go.
the language to say, well, they were just experiencing passion fatigue. But this is the stuff that we need, because although COVID is 5 years away, we're 5 years away from COVID, or maybe just 3 to 4 years away from COVID now, but we're still dealing with the impact, that lost, the children who lost parents, who lost that rock in their family. So let's get in contact with Sculpted Clay Productions
And let's
and Miss,
boost joy in our schools, because you're absolutely right. Everything that you said, but there is joy. We can
yes.
bring joy into education. We absolutely can. And we must. We must. And we can do it.
Absolutely. Let's bring joy. Let's celebrate joy. If you're in a school and you're not laughing at least 3 times a day, and I'm talking about a good belly laugh, something is wrong, because children are the best comedians
Hilarious.
walking, and they don't even know that they're being comedians. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining us on the Teacher Support Podcast. Thank you, Isis Clay, CEO and founder of Sculpted Clay Productions, where they focus on emotional wellness in marginalized communities. And again, teachers, principals, any administrators out there, if you're working in a school, remember that some child is coming to school every day because of you.
Mhm.
They may not know that investment that they're making in the day is for them in the long run, but we stand in the gap for them. And we want to use these self-care strategies to make sure that we're able to be there and be whole. And as Isis said, let's put ourselves first. because when we show up whole, we're better for our children, we're better for our families. So again, thank you for joining us on the Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross. So make sure you please like, comment, and subscribe on our podcast. Thank you.